They don't need it because the British government, and I'm sad to say the British opposition parties, support Israel and jump to do Israel's biddings, not under pressure, but very willingly. And of course, you know that the genesis of the whole crime of Zionist colonization in Palestine starts in London, and Britain has been very consistent in its alliance and its support for Israeli crimes, with very, very few exceptions.
International solidarity with Palestine and the BDS is a global campaign that seeks to put economic and political pressure on the Israeli occupation government in order to end its occupation of the Palestinian land and ends its everyday crimes against the Palestinian people. In response, Israel and its supporters have implemented various strategies to counter and mitigate this form of international activism. To talk more about that, I have with me via Skype representative of the Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign from Scotland, Mr. Mick Napier. You're welcome. Great honor to have you on our program, Mr. Mick.
Thank you for the invitation, Osama. Always a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you. The Israeli occupation government is placing more pressure on the activists around the world in order to silence them when they speak up and speak out for the rights of the Palestinian people. Do you think that this policy by Israel and its supporters in different areas in the world, is it because of the impact of your activism on the Israeli occupation state?
Last week, a fresh scandal erupted in Britain. It was discovered that the Israeli embassy was trying to pressurize the legal authorities in terms of taking on a group, a very important group called Palestine Action, who tried to interdict arms companies, the supply of arms to Israel by UK arms companies, and who have been going in front of juries many times up and down Britain and very largely winning. The juries have accepted their defence that it is justified to commit a small offence, a crime against property, in order to prevent a greater crime, i.e. sending arms to the State of Israel. So the government in Britain is thinks it has a problem, and even the Israeli embassy now is trying to change things in Britain so that these people are convicted and sent to prison. So yes, I think they're very worried. They're worried at the high level of some BDS activity in California or in Britain, and they're taking steps to try to intimidate and frighten people from standing up for Palestinian freedom.
Yes, and Mick, in the siege on Gaza, stop genocide against the Palestinians, stop settlement building. If uttered in public streets in certain areas in the Western world, such statements and activities are considered as a crime. So do you think that the Israeli government is to some extent succeeding in mobilizing Western and Eastern governments against the supporters of the Palestinians' rights?
No, Osama, I don't think so. I don't think the Israeli government has that kind of power. Their embassies have that kind of power here in Britain. They don't need it because the British government, and I'm sad to say the British opposition parties, support Israel and jump to do Israel's biddings, not under pressure, but very willingly. And of course, you know that the genesis of the whole crime of Zionist colonization in Palestine starts in London, and Britain has been very consistent in its alliance and its support for Israeli crimes, with very, very few exceptions over the decades. I mean, I myself, with 4 other members, stood in a Scottish court, and the prosecutor said, after several years of us wondering what could they possibly say, he said it was racist to say the words, "End the siege of Gaza, genocide in Gaza." Now that was ridiculed, that was thrown out by the judge. We won, the authorities lost, and there's a whole history across Europe actually of activists who stand their ground and actually win. In France, for example, the government criminalized some BDS campaigning. And in France, they have a very large and very active and very determined Palestine solidarity movement, BDS movement. But the activists went to the European court, and the European court, which is not controlled by governments, smacked the French government very hard and supported the right to campaign for boycott. So that was a victory against the French government by French activists, and we can cite other examples across Europe, Osama.
Yes, and Mick, at the personal level, when you face such problems because of your activism, as you said that illegal action was filed against you and you were accused of, being involved in these activities, of course, for the rights of the Palestinians against the Israeli colonial project. So how do you face such situations, you and other people who might be facing the same thing as you, Mr. Mick? Do you feel that you need to subside, you need to stop, or you get more momentum to go ahead with your activities?
We always rely, Osama, on a secret which the Zionist movement, which the pro-Israel movement here wishes to try to keep, which is that they are deeply unpopular, that they have to take these actions of trying to influence the criminal justice system, trying to get rid of a cabinet minister who was insufficiently pro-Israel, because they know that popular opinion is hostile. Look, if we did not have the backing of a very large amount of public opinion, we would be vulnerable. But we know that if we stand our ground, if we don't give in, if we don't retreat, if we don't apologize, then we can win. And that has been the record of a lot of people who have fought and who have won. Now, that's not always the case. The Labour Party is not firm ground in Britain on which to fight against this, because they have in the past, before Jeremy Corbyn, actually been pro-Zionist. Not anymore. Sorry, not under Jeremy Corbyn. But there are many, many examples of people fighting and winning.
Yes.
And there's a fresh move by the government now in Britain to pass a law to prevent local councils doing what they did with South Africa and boycotting South Africa. So this is a fight that's just been launched by the Conservative government in London. They're losing it in Scotland. The Scottish government has told them they will not go along with them, and a big fight is coming.
Yeah. Mick, you mentioned the European court, which is not subject to any government, and at the same time, the activists who support justice and the rights of the Palestinians are getting more courage and more momentum to stand firm in the face of such Zionist campaign against them. Concerning the European governments that support the Israeli occupation, and in particular the current Israeli rightist extremist settler colonial government headed by Benjamin Netanyahu, we saw what happened in Italy. The Italian government, in coordination with Biden's American administration, facilitating a meeting between the Libyan foreign minister and the Israeli foreign minister, and how the people of Libya, the brave, courageous people who kicked her out for such meeting. So how could the activists and the solidarity movement in Europe could deliver a message to the government of Italy and other similar governments that working on such projects is harmful to the Palestinian cause and the Palestinian people, right?
We have to continue to boycott and isolate the apartheid state. I may have mentioned this before some time ago, Osama. The American port on the Pacific is Oakland. And in Oakland, since 2014, since Operation Protective Edge, no Israeli ships have been allowed to unload in that major port. The workers there refuse to unload the Israeli ships. And Mr. Trump and Mr. Biden are unable to force them. The Israelis can use guns to kill Palestinians, but the Americans cannot use guns at the moment to kill workers who unload Israeli ships. That's the USA. We find here in Britain young people continuing to go to go into arms companies and drive an Israeli arms company, Elbit, out of cities in England. It's very inspiring. Some of them have been jailed. They don't suffer anything like Palestinian prisoners, of course, but it's still horrible to be jailed for this kind of solidarity activity. Look, we have to fight. This is the time we're alive. We don't always, we can't win every time, but we win a lot of the time. And I refer you to the situation in the USA, Osama. A majority of senators have supported a bill to fine people who campaign for BDS $1 million with possible 20 years in prison. Now that's telling you they're afraid. They're afraid because the tide of public opinion at the popular level is only moving in one direction because of the more obvious, more open, more shameless barbarism of Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and Netanyahu's cabinet. In the past, they covered their crimes with a fig leaf, but now they don't even care. They're crazy with a bloodlust, and they think they don't need America anymore, whereas their predecessors were always very careful to check with Washington. So now it becomes a little bit easier for us to win the center ground.
Yes.
Say the choice is either Palestinian freedom or these beasts, these people who exult in killing Palestinians. And we know that Ben-Gvir kept before he became a minister, kept a photograph of Goldstein on his wall, the man who massacred worshippers in the Hebron mosque. So in a horrible sense, our job becomes easier, Osama, yes.
Yeah. And make my final question to you concerning the current Israeli government arming of Israeli settlers and supporting them to commit crimes against the Palestinians, killing people on the streets, damaging Palestinians' houses and properties, uprooting olive trees, and other forms of violations, green-lighted by the Israeli government. So where is this government is heading? Do you think we are going to face the reality of two Israeli states, one for Israeli liberals, as they call themselves, and one for the religious extremist settler groups?
We see a political crisis in Israel at the moment. Huge numbers of Israeli Jews against other huge numbers of Israeli Jews. One group, Ben-Gvir, Smotrich and Netanyahu, they want to accelerate ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians. But the other group really just wants business as usual, the same as the last few years to continue. They don't want a quick, dramatic, another Nakba tomorrow, but they want to continue with the crimes of the last 50 years. So in that situation, it's more profound than that because there are other issues at stake. But I think the possibility of Israel becoming much weaker is certainly there because a nation divided like that is certainly much weaker to confront the justified demands of the Palestinians for freedom and for justice. But where it's going to go, nobody knows. It's very dangerous. A wounded beast can be a very dangerous thing indeed. So who knows the future? But I think underlying the whole thing, the crisis inside the Zionist bloc of Israel is to do with the fact that they have not succeeded in driving all the Palestinians out. That Palestinians in 100 different ways continue to resist. And that is at the root of this profound crisis inside Israeli politics. We can only admire and be inspired by Palestinian resistance, Sumud, and every kind of resistance, without exception. And I think, given that in an anti-colonial situation, if I can just add one word, Osama, in an anti-colonial fight, it's not the side which is militarily powerful, which is violent, which is ready to kill. That's not the side that wins in Algeria, in Yemen, in Vietnam, and so on. It's the people who can absorb this terrible punishment and pay a terrible price for their freedom, but can still endure. And I think by that token, the Palestinians can be victorious, can win their freedom.
Mick Perry, representative of the Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign, it has been great honor having you on our program. Thank you very much.
The honor is entirely mine.
You're welcome. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching, and from you, Sam as well. Have a nice time.